That's a bullet train. That's right. This is what it looks like when you fire a bullet. Now this is I've done this lesson before, and so I kind of updated it a little bit, but I did it during COVID when I was up here by myself and we were only doing Facebook. So we would put that on about 3 minutes before we got started so people know we're here, we just hadn't got started yet. So, okay. But in keeping with that theme,
that's a train.
That's a train. Training up a child. We have to train up our children. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about this. I mean, we got a whole passel of youngins in the church, and I was hoping for more parents here tonight. I'll just have to.
No.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Hey, look at it. It's too late for them. They've made their mistakes.
What?
For them, for you. It's too late for them, y'all, him. So, not unless her name's been changed to Sarah. No. All right. So train up a child. It's not a long. Full disclosure. I've been working all week. So I normally don't do physical work. I manage and sit at the desk. Well, I've been moving furniture and running from one side of site to the other side of site, and I'm tired. So, training up a child, raising children, the rearing of children is a very important thing. This is where you get a chance to see all the mistakes that were made in your own upbringing. Yeah, you. No mistakes. No mistakes were made in the.
Oh no, I didn't raise her. Her mom did.
Well, no, that's what I mean though. But you'll get a chance to see all the. So you go home and tell mom, "Hey, look, here's where you went wrong, mom." No. She's like, I'm not saying nothing to my mom. All right, training up a child. The Bible gives us a lot of information about raising children. And the first admonition is in Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So we see here this admonition to raise children properly, and we see a promised outcome, right? The promised outcome is that not necessarily right away, but after some time, the child will return to a faith in God, okay? You can come up front, baby. Oh, you're waiting on the... Okay, so there's a line. So when he is old, he will not depart from it. So we have this promise, right? And we either have or know of children who were brought up in Christian households who have become adults and have drifted away, let us say. And here the promise is God has not abandoned those children, okay? Those people. He hasn't abandoned them. He's constantly working to draw them back to himself. Now, understand that free will is supreme, okay? If a person makes up their mind and says, I will not, God does not force the issue. So free will is a very important thing. I heard it said by one minister one time, when you get to heaven and God is sitting in judgment, you know, he will have basically two sentences. And one sentence will be enter into heaven, right? And that will be by his will. And the other sentence will be depart into hell, and that will be by your will. Right? And so it depends on whose will you follow. Do you follow your own, or do you follow God? If you follow your own, you're basically sentencing yourself, and that's the point. So it's an interesting word here that we see in this Proverbs, train. Right? And though I know what the first slide was, it's not a choo-choo train. It's training, okay? Train up a child. Notice it was not educate your child, right? It was train a child. Train up a child in the way that they should go. So, if I had to ask you to think about it a minute, what would you say is the difference between training and education?
Education, book knowledge.
Education is book knowledge. Very good. Did you read ahead?
No.
Oh, okay. That's right. But what is training? So what?
Action.
Actions. Very good. All right, never mind. We're done. I don't need to go any further now. Y'all sit down. Education imparts knowledge. Okay. So we can educate, and to educate simply means to bring knowledge about. But training imparts action. So, well, I'm quite certain you probably didn't come up here and peek at all the answers. I'm not sure about the other guy.
I'll never tell.
Training imparts action. Training overcomes the natural instinct and provides a course of action like an instinct, right? But it's contrary to the natural instinct. You say, oh, well, what do you mean? As an example here, I used potty training. Anybody ever potty trained a child? So what is their natural instinct? That just to go, to play until they have to go, and then to go so they can play some more, right? And what you have to do is you have to break that, and so we potty train. Now, potty training, if you've ever trained a child, that can be difficult.
Frustrating is the word.
It can be problematic. I mean, the child, there's some trauma that can be imparted to the child, right? Because they have to learn something. Another example, I didn't put this down, but another example is, for those of you who are in the military, boot camp. So what is the natural instinct for most human beings when guns go off, right? Gunfire, and bullets are whizzing by your ears? Duck, hit the ground, run away, right? This is the natural instinct, right? But boot camp has to train you, not educate, right? I can educate you. Now, this is what a bullet sounds like when it misses your ear by that much. And I can give you all of the facts and figures, but that won't change your instinct. Training changes your instinct to react. That's why a lot of times when guys are going into combat, their COs will tell them, remember your training, right? Remember your training, right? Firefighters. How many of y'all have ever trained as a firefighter, right? Or even if you've been in a plant, they at least handed you a fire extinguisher and told you to walk up on this little fire pit and put it out, right? And we when I was at Exxon, they wanted to train, they took volunteers because they wanted to train second-tier firefighters so that when the first tier was in there, those of us who had had the training could, do behind-the-scenes or background kind of work to support them, or to fill in as a fourth man on a hose team, right, to assist holding on the hose. And so there was a moment they had a big fire pit, and they would pump hexane and natural gas and several other mixtures into it and light it. I mean, this thing was just a roaring fire, and you could feel the heat 30, 40, 50 feet away, right, depending on how hot they were. And so I had the opportunity. I was on the nozzle for a hose team, and we advanced on the fire. And the wind shifted, and the fire rolled over on top of us. Right? We had the and they always told you left for life. You run to full, a widespread mist, right? And that's what would protect you. And so that's what we were doing. And I decided right then, no amount of training was going to substitute for my natural instinct to get the heck out of there when there was a fire, right? That's all. No, I'm not going into this stuff. It'll blow up. Then what are you going to do? This left for life, this little, that ain't solving nothing. So, but training gives us course of action, okay? It gives us action. It changes our natural instinct. And so we have to not educate children. And this is a big problem, I think, in culture today. We teach our children who Jesus is, but we don't train them, right? And we laugh about it a little bit, right? When I was growing up, I had a drug problem. My parents drugged me to church. Then what that was training. How hard is it to get up on Sunday morning and come to church? Because you're trained. But when you're not trained, right? Getting up on Sunday morning, I mean, Sunday morning is your morning, because Saturday morning you got to get up and mow the yard. But Sunday morning, you can just laze around all morning, right? And so there's no training there. And so training is a very integral part of this, okay? Our children must not simply know the right thing to do, but be capable of doing it even in the face of overwhelming circumstance, right? What is the first thing a child does when you catch them doing something they're not supposed to be doing?
I didn't know.
They lie.
They do lie.
They lie. And you know what? They don't have to be trained to lie.
No.
They will lie by instinct. This is the natural instinct of a human being. What do we have to train them to do? Tell the truth. To be honest. To fess up. Right? Cheeks puffed out full of cookies. Have you been in a cookie jar? Mm-mm. Right? I can see that you have. Why are you lying to me? So we have to train them. Right? And so that's what we're going to be talking about tonight is training a child. Now, of course, we all want for our child to grow up with peace and prosperity, right? We want for them to be upstanding citizens, to have good reputation, to be responsible, honest, and most importantly, we want them to grow up to be adults remaining faithful to God. Not to church, right? We were talking a little bit, Dawn and I were talking a little bit about this on the way to church tonight, is, a lot of the mistakes we make is listen, I'm the first one to say church is important, but a lot of times we tend to substitute church for God. And a relationship with church is not important. It's the relationship with God that is important. But what's the difference?
God comes first with everything.
God comes first. But what's the difference between church and God?
The relationship with God is a personal relationship.
Personal relationship, good, but follow that line of thinking. Yes, I'm going to be trying to draw you out to get you to speak.
God is more spiritual and church is more maybe earthly.
Okay, physical. Okay. You don't have to raise your hand, baby. Just shout it out. No, I said shout it out.
The difference between what? Between God and religion?
Say.
Relationship between God.
What's the
and
difference?
relationship
What's the
between
difference of relationship with church and relationship with God?
Relationship with church.
It's a difficult question, right?
I had like an answer and then I.
Okay, so that's okay. That's okay. So let me say this, and tell me if this doesn't resonate. How many times are you in church a week? Twice? 3 times?
I think I have it now.
Okay.
Relationship with God is every single day, all the time, and then a relationship with religion in the church.
Yes. Your relationship with God is every day. You're never at a point, in a position, at a time where God is not right there with you. But where is church? Now, if you have a relationship with God, then you want to be in church, right? Because church is where we come to worship God, to demonstrate obedience, and to fellowship with other believers.
You have to also make sure that you understand what church is and what church is not, right? So you will hear a lot of people who, I'm just going to say it the way it needs to be said, despise the church and won't set foot inside of an edifice where a church community meets, but they'll go hang out at a coffee shop or someplace else, and they're hanging out with some other professing Christians, and they're having their little coffee meeting and whatnot, and because 2 or 3 were gathered there, well, I go to church every time I go to the coffee shop. Not really. I mean, kind of, but no, because do you really have accountable, loving community with that group of people?
Right.
Or is that group of people just like-minded in your somewhat similar walk with Jesus? And instead of iron sharpening iron, you're just, validating each other's lack of desire to be in a community that holds you to account. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of people get confused with their relationship with church and God and take it as because I go to church every Sunday, that automatically means I have to go to church.
Oh, agreed.
Yeah.
And right, and that's the point. That's the point. Is you need a relationship with God, because a relationship with God is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? Church is Sunday. Now, what happens in church, it doesn't happen at the coffee shop. Worship. Corporate worship. To hear the other believers worshiping. To worship with them. What else can typically happen in a church, may or may not happen in a coffee shop, and that is testimony. Not validating your belief. Oh, you're right. You know, your wife mistreats you. She doesn't understand you. No, not you. Your wife understands you perfectly.
She knows me
Yes,
like
she
the back
does.
of her hand.
So, but to hear honest teaching, right, that challenges us. You know, if you're not getting challenged about what you believe and why in the Word, then there's a relationship problem, okay? And so I want to bring that out. We want to bring our children up with a relationship with God. If they have a solid relationship with God, guess what? They're going to be in church. And if they're at a church where there is some flaw, some shortcoming, some issue, you know what they're going to do? They're going to go find another church
That has an issue and a shortcoming and a flaw.
Well, but
Yeah.
if it teaches the Word, if it's full of people with relationship with God, for instance, and I give you just as a for instance, there are plenty of churches that do not preach the Word of God.
That's right.
And so if you show up in your relationship with God and you're sitting there going, you know, these people never crack open a Bible. I got to find me some other place to eat. I mean, what would you do at a restaurant if you walked in and sit down at a restaurant and they showed up, you know, and they gave you a menu, and the only thing on the menu was a cup of coffee? You can have a cup of coffee. Here you go. Here's your cup of coffee. You're like, yeah, but I'm hungry. Yeah, I'm so, well, cup of coffee, that's what we serve here. I need meat, right? This is what Paul said. Paul said, you know, I ought to be able to serve you meat. He was talking to a church. I think it was Corinth. He was talking to the church. He said, I want to serve you deep things to think of.
He told them it was time for them to stop living on the milk of the Word and start.
And he said, instead, y'all are scooting around drinking milk, drinking the simple things. He said, we need to move on. We need to, they're mowing the yard. We need to discuss some of the heavier things, right? Now, I don't know if you've noticed, perhaps you've not, perhaps I flatter myself, but I tend to get deep into the Word to discuss some of the heavier things, right? And I do that because I want you to go, I don't know if I agree with that, Brother Eric, or not. This is something interesting.
And then come Sunday, the pastor will preach, and it'll just kind of solidify what he taught on Wednesday night, and you go, maybe the Holy Ghost is trying to tell me something.
Maybe the Holy Ghost. Baby, just shout out, honey.
I was actually just recently thinking about that. There's, I don't remember what verse it was, but in the Bible it says something about not to rely on just man's word, to go look for yourself and go read it for
Oh,
yourself,
absolutely.
not just rely on
Oh,
the person.
open your scriptures.
Study to show thyself approved.
Study.
That's why I've heard you say it, I've heard Pastor Shannon say it, I've heard a lot of others say it. Don't agree with what I'm saying, it's in the Bible.
Yeah.
Read the Bible yourself and know for sure what it says.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important for us to, again, Brother Shannon said whether it's a digital or analog, you know, we need to follow along in the Word.
Right.
You know, just because the minister says, thus says the Word of God, that doesn't mean that's what the Word says.
Here's another thing that corporate worship does for you, and I'll use this congregation as an example. Years ago, when Brother and Sister Giberson, Eric and Don, started coming to church here, I preached a sermon. Brother and Sister Giberson, distinguished. I preached a sermon around relationships, and I quoted from the Apostle Peter. I want to say it was in 1 and 2 Peter, where he says, treat your wife with respect and honor as the weaker vessel, so that your prayers be not hindered. In other words, if you treat your wife with contempt and you talk bad to her and you don't treat her like a co-heir with you in Christ and as the more tender of the two of you, God's not going to hear your prayers. And Brother Eric, he said, man, I really got to ask you about that. I just ain't never.
Where's that verse?
I showed it to him in the scripture. He goes, brother, I learned something today. And I've learned stuff from him. So here's the deal. In corporate worship, in the corporate setting, in the community of the church, you know what has to take a back seat for you to be able to learn from one another and the Holy Spirit? Your pride. You have to be humble and meek in your attitude.
So, no one, I don't care who the minister is, you can go, Billy Graham, you can go back through time, no one has advanced any new ideas since Jesus and the apostles, including Apostle Paul. In fact, Apostle Paul said to us, if anybody shows up preaching a different Jesus, preaching a different message,
Call them accursed.
even if it's an angel of light, and that'll handle one of the major denominations we have in the United States today, even if it's an angel of light, let it be accursed, because there is no new interpretation.
That's right.
Okay? Scripture is where we go. So all of these things you hear me teach about on Wednesday nights, you hear Brother Shannon preach on Sunday morning, they have been preached ad nauseum. That means they've been preached until people get sick. Over the last 2,000 years. Okay? We're simply giving you the wisdom that God has delivered via the Scriptures to mankind. Okay, but we want them to be, getting back on track here, we want our children to be faithful to God. So how do we get there? What does this word training really mean? Okay, so there's no easy answer for this. And I will tell you now, at this stage in my life, that raising children runs 50 or 60 years. 70 if you happen to be long-lived.
83.
Well, you haven't been raising children for 83 years.
60 years.
Yeah.
Think?
It feels like that.
So, as a toddler, you're
60 years.
60 years, exactly. Okay? And so you are still raising children. Now, the strategy's changed. Okay? Because you can't take them and bend them over your knee and paddle their little bottoms anymore. And to be honest, you really shouldn't. That should not be your first course of action. And we'll cover that in a little bit.
That's right. That's exactly.
Who said?
Who says? All right. Now, it has been said, and I thought this was so good. I didn't come up with this. When your children are young, you talk to them about Jesus. And when they're grown, you talk to Jesus about them.
Yeah.
Right? This is the strategy I was talking about, right? We're telling them all about Jesus, and then as they get older and grown, we begin to take our concerns, our worries, our cares to Jesus about them, right? So, like I said, now, one of the things, anytime we start talking about training up children, raising children, right? What's the old saw that we all fall back on, right? Spare the rod and spoil the child, right? And we use this old maxim, this cute little catchphrase, as an excuse to just whip the daylights out of our children as if that is all that is required to be a parent. Okay? And if that is all you are doing in an attempt to train up your child, you are making a mistake. Okay? What?
Don't work.
Spanking don't work anyway. So it doesn't give us that, okay? As with all ideas taken from the Bible, this phrase does not embody the real meaning, the real concept of what is the Scriptures attempting to teach us. So let's look at the origins of this slogan. It's Proverbs 13:24, and it reads this way. What did I do? Go back. I got it out of the New Living Translation, right? Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children care enough to discipline them. Okay? Now, in the King James, it's worded just a little bit different. Let me flip over there and read that as well. But I mean, it's pretty similar. It says, "He that spareth his rod hateth his son, but he that loveth him chastises him early." Okay? And so that's where we get spare the rod, spoil the child, right? Well, while that seems like that's what that's saying to us, right? It seems like it's giving us, telling us that our primary means of training is to beat them. And to beat them soundly, okay? And any of you who've had young children can most assuredly agree with what's on the screen, right? We must beat them lest they turn evil, rise up, and eat us in the middle of the night, the little heathens, okay? But if we take a careful look, if we do a careful study of what is really involved in this verse, there's a lot there. And it's much deeper than just that very first casual glance, okay? So let's look at the verse again. Those who spare the rod of discipline hate their children. Those who love their children will care enough to discipline them. Now the word spare, right? Spare the rod, that's easy. Okay, and it simply means no lack of, not holding back, right? Plenty, right? We don't. If we're sparing, then we're holding back. We're creating a drought, right? So spare means to be plentiful, right? Or not to be spare means to be plentiful, okay? But it's the next word. It's the next word that I want to focus on. Rod. R-O-D. Rod. What is a rod? Okay? Well, right? If we were in the old King James, right, we would think, well, that is a paddle of sufficient size as to get their attention when struck. Okay? That's what that means. But does it? Okay? Rod here in the Old Testament is used for quite a few things. Now, basically, it's a stick. Right? It's a stick. In Old England, and when I say Old England, I mean 1600s, 1700s, they had a wasn't a written rule, but it was a
Rule of thumb.
yeah, it was a kind of a common law, right? A known thing. It was called the rule of thumb. You know where the rule of thumb comes from? It is legal to beat your wife or children with a stick, a rod, as long as it's no bigger than the diameter of your thumb. Now you notice who was included in that beating, right? Wife or children. And that's the rule of thumb. So, I'm sorry. What?
He said, where's Tammy?
Hey,
you better be. You're still wounded, man.
Yeah.
All right.
He's still feeling look.
You know,
Don't make him laugh too hard, because it hurts.
he's very brave when she's not in the room. You notice that?
You have a question?
yes.
Yeah, not a question, okay, just one second. To me, when I hear rod, I think of almost like a shepherd's staff. So more like, instead of hearing you beat them with it, it sounds more like you lead them. Like
She
a shepherd.
reading it.
I know, right? She's practically prophetic. I need for you to come
Do you
sit
want
on
to
the
come
front
teach
row.
this class, young lady?
She can just read the rest of your
That's what
notes.
when I hear rod, I think of
So,
rod.
well, and you would be right.
Not hitting
But-
and beating the sheep.
Yeah, thanks a lot for ruining the. Okay, so the word rod in the Old Testament depends on context for exactly what it means. Okay, and so as we look through the Old Testament, we find that this word can mean any of the following: a rod or a stick used for punishing, writing. You know, today, you know what we call it? Pencil. Number 2, yellow pencil. So there's a story amongst us who keep the aliens in the basement about how in the 70s, when Skylab and the Russian Soyuz joined up, and we had the very first American-Russian collaboration in space, one of the astronauts was showing off this fancy pen that NASA had spent millions of dollars to develop that would write in space. You know that an ink pen won't write in space because it depends on gravity to draw the ink out of the, right? You ever tried to write like this?
Yeah, you're
right. And pretty soon you can't get any ink out of the pen.
Yeah.
And so they developed this pen that would constantly pump ink into there. And the Russians took one look at that. He was bragging on it. We developed this. It took, a million scientists and $20 million, whatever it was. And the Russian looked at that and said, we solved this years ago. He said, really? What do you use? And he reached in his pocket, pulled out a number 2 yellow pencil. Is it writes anywhere, right? So, ain't wrong. Writing, okay? Fighting. Right? Anybody ever seen Robin Hood?
No.
Right? That's what they had, the staff, the rod, right? The cudgel, and they used it for fighting, okay? Ruling, a scepter. You ever seen any of the old movies, the king sitting on his throne, and he had a stick? Usually there's some frou-frou at the top, right? And he would hold his stick. He looked like a fool by today's standards, but that's very cool back in the day, right? Had the stick, right? I got my little stick. Okay, so ruling. Measuring. Make sure it came up. Yes. Measuring. How many of y'all have a yardstick at home? I know that's very passe now. Everybody's got a tape measure. But a yardstick, I still have 3 or 4 yardsticks around the house, right? Walking and etc. Or figuratively speaking, a clan or a tribe. A rod could be the sign of a clan or a tribe, right? A totem, if you will. Now, we all know what a totem pole is, right? It's a great big thing. But in ancient Israel, their totems were something that they carried, and it signified that they were the head of a clan, okay? And if you had that same emblem on yours, it signified you were a member of that clan. So, there it is right there. Look at the top of that list. What does it say? Punishing. And we'll get to that. We're going to talk about punishing. But let's look at the others first, okay? So, the first one, writing. Writing or education or wisdom. Okay? A rod was also a pencil. It was used for writing. To be able to write, and by extension to read, meant to be educated. When the Bible says train up your child, It means a parent must invest, and that is what is that investment? That investment is educating the child. How many of us farm out investment of education of our children to others? We send them to public school, but we don't reinforce. I got a son-in-law, and is driving my wife nuts because he has a curriculum. Now we're in summer break, and he's got 3 kids in school, and he has a summer curriculum. They have spelling words, they have math problems, they have reading, and he wants them doing these things every day. He's investing in their education. Now, he also brings them to church, right? We bring our children to church. We put them in, what do they call it? Sunday school, children's church, and we teach them. But why do we depend on others, and Sister Jennifer and Sister Tammy and Sister Barbie? They're I was trying real hard not to say Barbara. Sister Barbie back there. They do a fantastic job, but they're not They're not the parents of your children. You are the parent. How many of y'all have a recollection of arguing with your parents about something you wanted to do, and you there was one of them right there. So they've escaped from Sunday school. Somebody go back and check on Barbie, because
she's still there.
See, so the little ones are running rampant in the lobby.
It's true. It's true.
Oh, it's true.
Oh, it's true. Okay. I was like, oh, what are they doing now? So how many of y'all remember using as an excuse to do something, but my friends are doing it, and your parents saying, you're already giggling, you know where I'm going, don't you? Your parents saying, well, they aren't my children, you are. And you're not going to do that. My dad, they're not my son, you are, and you're not doing that. Now, my grandmother had a different way of saying it. And I won't quote her verbatim, but basically she said, if all your friends were jumping off a bridge, would you go jump off too?
She knew my mother.
Right? Although she used imagery of excrement and cows and okay? I said I was cleaning it up a little bit. But see, that was over 60 years ago, and I still remember that lesson my grandmother taught me, okay? So, again, I'm not inferring that you have to bear the burden of teaching advanced mathematics. Look, you don't have to teach algebra. Algebra's tough enough for those of us who had to study it, let alone have to teach it, okay? We're not all cut out to be homeschoolers, okay? But parents should ensure their children get an education, up to and including a higher education, college or trade school, if that child is so disposed. I remember having a discussion with my dad after a year of college, saying, I don't think I'm cut out for college. And he said, well, what do you want to do? Fortunately, my dad surrounded himself with honest and reputable men. And knowing that I wouldn't accept any suggestion from him at the time, being 18 years old, one of his friends said, why, you ought to go down to the local union hall and get an apprenticeship program. Get an education there. Be a good job for you for the rest of your life. And I thought, wow, what an idea. Now, my dad was an electrician. Go figure, right? But he wouldn't tell me, because again, he knew if he said it, it would be. But he surrounded himself with good, reputable men, right? Honest men. And so that's what I did. I said, that's what I want to do. My dad was like, okay. And put in a good word for me down at the local union hall, so that when I showed up thinking I was all that and a bag of chips, they said, hey, we want you in school, right? And I thought, woohoo, they know how smart I am, right? No, they just got a phone call from my dad and his friend going, let the boy in, he'll mount something someday. Maybe not right away, but soon, okay? But we as parents must teach what the schools will not. Morals, ethics, and who Jesus is. Remember I said when they're little, we talk to them about Jesus? It's up to us to teach Jesus. I remember, and I did not do this with my children so much, but I remember my dad, we sat down every evening and we read 4 chapters out of the Bible. Right? Our brother read a chapter, I read a chapter. I'm going to tell you something. Numbers is a very tough book to read when you're only 10 years old. And Methuselah. Anyway, this guy had sons. Okay? And we would read. Now, that didn't get me any deep and abiding knowledge of Scripture. But it was an experience that set a tone for later in life. Okay? And so we want to teach them, and we also want to teach them the difference between them and all the other animals, right? And that difference is an eternal soul, right? Does anyone remember anyone having a conversation with you about when you were little, about your soul and what it was and what it is worth? Most of the time we get to adulthood and we end up in the church somewhere and some minister, thumping the pulpit telling us about our souls. And we're like, souls? I thought that's what was on the bottom of my shoes. No. Thank you. It's so nice to have somebody giggle at my jokes. Okay. Proverbs 9 and 10 teaches us that the fear or respect or reverence, not the trembling terror you get when you watch Nightmare on Elm Street. The fear, the reverence of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the holy is understanding. These are the things we're supposed to be teaching, bringing wisdom and understanding to our children, okay? 2 Timothy chapters 2 and 3. Oops. Where'd I go? There we go. Okay. 2 Timothy 2 and 3 talk of study before God, how the Word of God is a good source of wisdom and education, right? And that's what we were talking about a little earlier. Study the Word. Okay? Read your Bible. Read your Bible to your children. Don't read the King James Version. Okay? You don't have to do that. But there are plenty of good Bible stories for children that you can start them with. Just make sure that you don't leave the story as a caricature of itself, right? That you understand there's deeper meaning to some of these stories, okay? What we teach as parents, and this is one of the most important things, we must live. Remember I said we teach them morals, we teach them ethics. We have to live that in front of them as parents. As James would say, be a doer of the word, not a do as I say, not as I do parent. We have to be examples. The quote that Brother Shannon uses all the time, it's attributed to St. Augustine. No one's quite sure if he said it or not, but that's where everybody believes it came from. Witness to everyone you meet. When necessary, use your words. What does that mean? That your actions, your example precedes anything you say. They're going to have been watching your life. And when you speak, they're going to want to see that your words align with your deeds. Right? And if they don't, what does that mean? They're not paying any attention. They're not going to pay any attention. You're just like everybody else. You talk a good game, but you can't walk the walk. We got to walk the walk, especially in front of our children. Right? Those little eyes, those beady little eyes, they are fixed on us. Oh my gosh, right? They are going to be after us. Okay. Fighting, defense. Yeah, not fighting with your child, but fighting for your child. Defending your child, okay? Protection of. The parent is the defender of the child. When I was younger, I had a job. I know. Hold hold your amazement. And I worked for Pasadena Parks and Recreation, and I was the relief guy. So I was at a different park every day. Boom, 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 right? So there's a park over off Red Bluff Road there in Pasadena, almost to 225. And back in that day, it was kind of a rough part of town. And so one of my jobs was to close the game room up early because they had an exercise class coming in, right? And so those kids would get in there and they didn't want to leave. And so I had to throw them out. And sometimes that meant literally throwing them out. Anyway, I ran afoul of a little gang. Now, these were all, a couple of years younger than me, 14, 15. That's what they were at the time. But there was like 10 or 12 of them. And so I got them all pitched out, closed the door, mopped the floors, got ready for the exercise class, and they went to beating on that door with baseball bats and chains, wanting in. Like I wouldn't let them in. Let us in, we need to go to the bathroom. Yeah, right. What, do you think I was born last night? I know what'll happen. I'll open the door, y'all bum rush me, and then I'll have to throw y'all out of here again. So, now this is a large building, about the size of this whole church, made out of cinder block and hard linoleum floor. So them beating on the door on one end, guess what it did? It echoed. There's a payphone in the back, and that phone would ring. And my mom and dad had the phone number to all the parks I worked at. So I went back there and answered the phone, and my dad's on the phone. And we lived about 25 minutes away. He said, "Son, are you going to be home for dinner?" I said, "Yeah, I'll be home for dinner. I'm just waiting on the lady to show up now." He goes, "What is that noise in that building?" I said, tried to be very nonchalant. "Oh, they're just beating on the door with bats and chains." And there's silence on the other end of the phone. And he said, "What?" I said, "I kicked them out, and they want back in, and they're beating on the door, and I won't let them in. It'll be fine. The lady will show up in a minute, and they'll back away, and I'll get to my car, and I'll be home in a little while." He said, "Okay," hung the phone up. So I'm finishing up about 20 minutes. Remember, it's about a 25-minute drive. In a little less than 20 minutes, I hear this pound, pow, 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 pow. Got quiet, and then pow, 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 right? And I'm like, what is that? And then I hear my dad's voice on the other side of the door. "Hey, son, are you in there?" So I pop the door open, and there's my dad standing there. He says, "Your mama wants to know if you'll be home for dinner." I was just on the phone with you, right? But he's allowing me to save face, right? He's not going to say, "Hey, I came up here to rescue your butt," right? No, he's asking me, "Hey, this is why I'm up here. Are you going to be home for dinner?" And I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact." Well, I noticed that those kids had surrounded him. They had chains, their bats and stuff. Now, my dad, World War II vet, me, I always sized up the competition. Well, that's a big guy. I'm going to try to find a way around or out of this, right? My dad, there was only one way out of a situation like that, and it was over whoever was standing in front of him, and he didn't care how big it was. Right? I'll kick you in the knee, get you down in my height, and then we'll have this discussion, right? And so this one of the ringleaders said, "Oh, you came to save his little backside." My dad turned around and says, "I don't know what you're talking about. I came here to check, see if he'd be home for dinner. But if he needs saving, I'm the one that'll do it." And when he said it, he poked his finger in his kid's chest. Kid said, "Don't you poke your finger at me." Now, my dad's about 5'6", barrel-chested, like this, right? And he looked at that kid. He says, "I'll poke my finger at whoever I'm pleased to poke my finger at." And he backed him up out of the crowd, right?
Like that old man muscle fool.
Yeah, exactly so, right? And he says, "And if you think you want to do something," he says, "you pick that baseball bat up." He said, "They'll be picking you up off the floor." And I watched those kids just all back away. The lady showed up for the exercise class. I said, "There she is, Dad, let's go." Wow. But my dad charged into that situation. You won't talk about, I had a lot of respect for my dad. He charged into that situation. like nobody's business, right? Now, most of the time, right, the teacher sent home a note about your child misbehaving, and what do we want to do? We want to go down there and read that teacher the riot act. I'll defend my child. There's my little angel, right? Polish up them devil horns. Let's go down there and see that teacher, right? And we don't stop to think that, well, maybe my child, maybe the defense I need to mount here is in correcting the behavior of my child. I don't assume that every threat or every action against your child is a threat, especially like from a teacher, right? Give an honest assessment of your child. If you're failing in other areas, you might need to be prepared to fight the behavior in your child rather than the attack you perceive coming from the teacher, okay? So ruling, a scepter, right? So that was one of the other definitions, right? To be an authority over or to lead. All right, so this is where she was a little bit earlier, okay? You have a choice. If you're raising children, you have a choice. You can be their friend or their parent. You can't be both, and they got plenty of friends without you. They don't need another friend. They need a parent, okay? So if you abdicate this position of authority, you won't be able to teach your child anything. People want to be friends with their children. As soon as you become friend with your children, right, you've lost the moral high ground, okay? Now, that's not to say that your child shouldn't be able to confide in you, but you establish the rules, the guidelines, enable them to be safe, to grow well. Ephesians 6:4, you fathers provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Being in charge is not being a tyrant. Yeah, you need a strong hand sometimes, because some children can get just a little wayward. I'm shocked, do you hear? Okay? Being in charge, one mistake we always make is we want to treat a 16-year-old like they're 6. We want to treat a 6-year-old like they're 16. No, we have to be age appropriate, okay? One of our greatest challenges is to strike a balance between what's enough and what's too much, okay? Live the way you're teaching. We talked about that. The best leaders are those who prepare those under them for authority. Remember this, you're not raising children, you're raising parents. Meanwhile, she's over here going, wait, what? You're raising parents. You're raising the next generation. They're going to be in charge. If you have to ask, if you look at your children and go, what is the world coming to? The answer is exactly where you brought it. Because you're teaching the next generation. Okay. Measurement. No matter how old we are, we're going to measure ourselves against our parents. Right? We're going to, am I as good as my dad? Am I as good as my mom? Right? And now look, every set of parents, I remember being a teenager and having this series of thoughts, right? There were things I thought my dad did that I didn't like the way he did them, and I thought I will do them differently. And I'll get to that in a moment. And there are things about my dad, I like the way he does these things. I want to do just like that. I was measuring myself against my father. Right? To this day, my dad died a couple of months after my firstborn. My first child was born. Make sure I get that right. Okay, the thing I miss the most is never being able to speak to him as a father. Not with him being, with me being a father. Never being able to speak to him father to father. I never got that chance. So I constantly wonder, because I know my dad told me all the time, I'm proud of you, son, I'm proud of you doing fine, but I wonder, am I living up to his expectation? Am I measuring up? Right? So we have to provide the proper example. Our children are always watching. We talked about this a little bit. This is the other thing here. I never heard my, oh, wait a minute. This crazy thing here is, Philippians 3:17. We remember, dear brother, Paul writes this, brothers and sisters, pattern your lives after mine. Learn from those who follow our example. Even Paul said, you want to know how to be a Christian? Look at me. Follow after what I do. As parents, we provide the example, not only of how to be parents, how to be adults, how to be mothers, how to be fathers, how to be responsible people, how to be churchgoers, how to be faithful Christians. All of these things we are teaching by our example. Are we perfect? I laugh, right? No. We're doing the best we can. But
Say that again?
But if we're bringing God into the equation with our children, we are introducing them to the perfect, to the holy, to the righteous, okay? I never heard, talking about my dad, I never heard my father so clearly as when I would speak to my children. When they were growing up, they would do something and I would say, don't do that, or I would try to, and I would hear my dad, and I would realize I have become my father, right? All those things I thought, I really don't like the way my dad does that. And there I was saying that, an example comes to mind, and I'll use it real quick. One of my dad's favorite sayings when I was doing something that he didn't approve of, is he would say, now, it would behoove you to consider this other alternative course of action. And I'm like, behoove? What am I, a horse? Behoove? Right? It behoove me. My children were growing up. They did something. I say, it would behoove you to listen. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. The examples we provide our children get deeply ingrained. We have to be careful, okay? The most humbling or humiliating experience, and if y'all are all parents, you know exactly what I'm about to say, that you can have is when your child models your behavior. Well, what do you mean? I said, if it's good behavior, you're humbled. Oh, look, did you see the way that she shared her toy? Did you see the way he helped his sister up? Oh, that was so cute. That's what I'm talking about. I got little angels for kids. But if it's bad, right? Like the toy breaks and your little boy steps back and goes, why, you no good person. Where did you learn that language? Meanwhile, your wife is over there going, uh-huh. Yeah, uh-huh. Let me tell you where you learn that language. It's humiliating. But you know, the first time you have that experience, whether it's good or bad, you realize that they're getting it from you. My dad used to have another little saying he used to have. Well, I'd do something and my mama, she'd be all upset. He goes, well, at least he comes by it honest. What does that mean? It means I learned by watching. Right? And my dad was acknowledging the fact that he's got the same flaws we got, honey. Okay. All right. So, walking. Walking. I didn't think I was going to run this long, but you guys are asking so many questions. It's just walking. An aid to progress or an aid to growth, right? How many of y'all have ever been on a hike or any serious walking? You know how helpful it can be to have a walking stick, right? Especially if you're in rough terrain, right? You got a backpack on, you got a walking stick. It helps you stay steady, right? It helps you make progress. It gives you something to lean on when you get tired. Parents provide to their child these same qualities. It isn't easy growing up, you may remember, or not.
I think that was an insult to me. I didn't hear what you said, but I know it was aimed at me.
I said, you may remember growing up, or not.
Part of it.
I told somebody the other day, they said, how old are you? I said, I'll tell you this, I remember when the last dinosaur got killed. It isn't easy growing up. And although your children will never admit it, even after they're grown with children of their own, they will occasionally put out a hand to find your shoulder, just to give them a steady reference in life. You have to be there for that. Now you can't let on. Okay, this is the strategy change I was talking about, right? You can't let on that they're looking for help. You just have to provide it quietly. Let them take what they need. Right? Remember the difference between 6 and 36. Right? They're becoming parents in their own right. And they'll call you up and say, hey, Mom, how did you do this? And you don't go, well, boy, what a stupid little child. I tried to teach you this the whole time you were growing up. No, you simply say, oh, well, here, this is how I did it. You provide that information with gentleness and love, okay? Wait a minute. Let me read Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes 4:9-12. 2 are better than one because they have a good reward for their labor. For if they fall, the one will lift up his fellow. Woe to him that is alone when he falls, for he hath not another to help him up. Again, if 2 lie together, then they shall have heat. But how can one be warm alone? If one prevail against him, 2 shall withstand. And a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Help. Now listen. I know some folks came from less than optimum childhoods. You might not have had a parent that was a good example. This is where church comes in. This is where we have the verses in the Bible. Oh, men. That's me and you, by the way. Oh, men, teach the younger men. Okay? How to be fathers, how to be husbands, right? And older ladies, teach the younger ladies how to be mothers. Okay? This is where church comes in, right? We don't be bashful about reaching out to the elders in your church group, in your community, and saying, how did you handle this? If you don't have a good example, reach out to good examples around you. One of the smartest things a man or woman can do is to surround themselves with people of good character, high morals, and strong ethics. All right? Because, I'll tell you something. Children may not come to their mother or father to ask an important question, but they'll go to somebody in that circle. And you want to make sure that everybody you have in that circle would answer the question the way you need it to be answered. Okay, family. This is the last one. We're coming to the end of it. Yay! Family, clan, tribe, family. Too often we deny our children a sense of family. Both parents pursuing careers makes it easy to lose the children in the shuffle. One of the major draws for young people to gangs is a sense of belonging. I've always got your back. We're family, right? Your family, mom, dad, the siblings. These are the families. Your children should know beyond a shadow of a doubt they are loved and belong in your house. Never let them leave without knowing that they are loved, that they will be missed, and their return is anticipated with excitement. You know how you do that? By being glad to see them when they return. Oh, you're home. How was your day? Be genuinely glad to see them, even if they are little troublemakers. Okay? My wife, one of the things I've always admired is no one in the family. I'm not saying if you came over to the house, she might not do this for you. But none of the kids, none of the grandkids ever leave the house without her giving them a hug and telling them I love you. I don't even get out of the house without that. And I'm just the husband. Okay? She makes sure everybody leaves the house knows that they're loved and they're going to be missed. Right? So that's what it means to be family. And I put this in there. It's done by being glad when you see them return and taking an interest in their adventures while absent from you. Right? Don't just, yeah, okay, fine. I don't need to hear what you did today. No, sit them down. What did you do today? Let them tell you at their pace, the way they need to tell you. Family is important in the Bible. In fact, God's design is based on the family unit, and there are so many scriptures to point to this, but I like this one. Psalms 128, 3-6. Your wife will be like a fruitful grapevine, flourishing within your home. Your children will be like vigorous young olive trees as they sit around your table. Notice they're sitting around your table. Okay, that is the Lord's blessing for those who fear Him. May the Lord continually bless you from Zion. May you see Jerusalem prosper as long as you live. May you live to enjoy your grandchildren. May Israel have peace. The family is important. We need to make sure they know they are members of the family. Right? How many of y'all know somebody named Bubba? Right? You know what that is? That's short for brother. Right? And it comes from a family setting where younger siblings couldn't say brother, right? And so mom and dad helped them with Bubba. That's your Bubba, right? Or do you know somebody named Sissy? Same thing, sister, right? It reinforces family, and that's important. Family is important. Okay, we're going to close, finally, discussing in depth punishment. This is it. Spare the rod and spoil the child. Okay? It's a rod for punishing. Now, we know this one. We know it probably too well. If it is required, do it. Okay? Corporal punishment, a spanking or a beating, as King James refers to it, is not a sin if it is deserved. Proverbs 23:13. Don't fail to discipline your children. The rod of punishment won't kill them. I know they'll sound like they're dying, but they won't. Okay? Like I said, King James actually uses the word beating. So, while this does mean a beating or a physical striking, it also means a correction. Where do we go? Was I there? Okay, a correction. A minor punishment for teaching purposes, which may include a rebuke or the loss of a privilege. No Xbox for 5 days. This is punishment. This is not sparing the rod. It's not a beating, but it is still punishment. At 16 years old, you can't turn them over your knee and give them a spanking necessarily, but you can take away the keys to the car. No Xbox, right? You're grounded for 2 weeks. No, but Mom, the dance is Saturday night. I hope they have fun, because you won't be there. Okay? Here, get back. It's an infliction of a judicial penalty based on a standard. Now this is important. In other words, punishment for breaking a stated rule. This is the spanking. This is one of the most important rules, if you will, because Colossians 3:12, fathers, provoke not your children to anger, lest they be discouraged. What does that mean? Right? If you're going to spank them for cause. Make sure they understand the cause before they've broken. Right? These are the rules in this house. If you do this, you will get a spanking. Now you've given the crime, you've set the punishment. If the crime is committed, provide the punishment. Don't just grab the kid and spank him for no reason. For heaven's sakes, don't do the 3, 2. Okay, you quit. So no, just whop him. No. One of the things that drive a kid crazy is not understanding why they're getting spanked. My mother, bless her heart, after my dad died, my mother came and lived very close to us, like in the front yard. She had a house. She had her own house. She didn't just lay out there in the yard. You people. So she had her own house out there. And so my brother and I were sitting there one evening, sitting on the porch talking with her, and we got to talking about, we were reminiscing when we were kids and how we would have taken 2 or 3 or 4 whippings from my mother rather than one spanking from my daddy. My mother was just beside herself. Are you kidding me? We're like, what? She goes, he hardly even touched you. He bent you over his knee. Okay, now don't do that again. I said, Mom, you don't understand. You were all wind and fury, right? I mean, rah! And she would go to town, right? My dad, he would first send you to your room. You think about what you've done. Then he would call you from the room, and you had to walk from your room down the hallway, all the way across the living room to where he sat in his chair, watching you the whole way. And then he would stand you right in front of him. Do you know what you have done? Yeah. And what do you think I should do to you? That's a loaded question. What do you mean, what do I think you should do? You should let me go. No, wait, that'll get a worse. Because, see, this was reserved for when we had broken a rule we knew full well and understood would give us, and then he would turn us over, his knee, and I don't think my mother knew what she was talking about because he would swat us 3 or 4 times. Whack! Whack. He had a little board, right? Whack, whack, whack. And then send us back to the room. Think some more, right? I said, Mom, you don't understand. With my dad, it was a long, drawn-out ordeal. There were life lessons being taught. With you, it was a moment of pain, and then it was over, and we could go on about our day. It just flabbergasted her that when I would come home from work, my wife would be fussing at the kids. They'd be little heathens hanging off the wall. I walk in, I go, hey! And she'd get mad at me. That's not fair. I'm the dad. Okay? So sometimes, right, we have to spank them. Now, it can also be a warning, right? Right here, warning. To speak words about a future event with a focus on changing behavior. This was wrong for you, right? And so you get the lecture. Sometimes I'm sorry. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. Okay? An instruction, a teaching of a principle or axiom for life, the development of self-control. We have to teach him self-control. I'll tell you one more story and then we'll be done. I know, but this is all part of this, right? I want you to have a good understanding.
It's not a review.
Huh?
It's not a review.
No, it's not a review. So it's 6. Yeah, that's after this. So 60. You'll notice I didn't have a last week. We talked, So that, when I was 16, I got a job at Red Lobster. Okay, and Red Lobster was about 30 minutes from the house. It was up on Airport Boulevard at Hobby. And we lived way down. I could get on Belfort. Belfort turned into Howard, and Howard ran almost right straight to the house. And my dad had told me I kept coming home late. He gave me that warning, right? You cannot be home after midnight, son. Not on a school night. If you can't get home before midnight, you're going to have to quit this job. A warning. Words about a future event with focus on changing behavior. So one day, at 15 minutes to 11, which was closing time, the manager sat a large party. I was a busboy. So we had to wait until they were finished eating. At 10 minutes to 12, they finished eating. Boy, I had them tables cleaned. Yes! And my dad had a 1970 model Montego, Mercury Montego, had the big engine in it. That's what I drove to work. And Red Lobster had 2 driveways, an innie and an outie. And at 12:15, I got in the car, and I'm like, oh my God. I jumped in the car, and I went out the outie. Unbeknownst to me, my dad was coming in the innie in my mama's station wagon. And he saw me going out the outie, so he just swung through the parking lot and came up right behind me. Now, the first part of my trip was between Airport Boulevard coming down Belfort and I-45. That's a heavily patrolled area by members of law enforcement. And so the speed limit was 35 the whole way. So I did 45 because I was very late, and I was more afraid of my daddy than any police officer. I don't care. I'm sorry. I would rather spend the night in jail than run afoul of my daddy. When I got to I-10, the section between I-10 and Old Galveston Road, the speed limit was 35. But I was a little more comfortable on this section of road. And so I was doing 55. Almost 60. And when I crossed Old Galveston Road, it was like I was in my backyard. And I punched it. I was doing 80. Got into the neighborhood, down the street, around the block, up in the driveway, opened the gates, opened the garage door, and my mama's car was gone. And I thought, oh, they've called him out for overtime, called him out to work. He'll never know. Parked that car in the garage, closed the garage door, closed the gates, walked up to the house, put my hand on the back door handle, and from the wrong direction comes my mother's car. The same direction I had just come from. Fortunately, the flame in the streets had died down, so, And I knew I was caught. Went back out there, opened the gates in the garage door. He parked the car. I thought, he's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. He's going to kill me. Comes up on the back porch and says, sit down here a minute, son. I want to talk to you. I was like, this is it. I'm going to die. He's going to tell my mama he couldn't find me. I'm going to be buried in the backyard. They'll find my bones in 20 years. He said, son, I realize I told you you had to be home before midnight. He said, so part of this is my fault. If you're going to be late, he said, don't rush. Just call me and tell me. He said, because I was behind you the whole way. And I kept up with you until you got to I-45. I kept you in sight till you got to Old Galveston Road. But son, I couldn't even see your tail lights after that. And that's way too fast. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to quit that job. That was it. That's all he said to me. Because I was 16. So
That was Jennifer.
Time to wake up.
really?
That was Jennifer.
Okay. All right. So
Time to get up. Quit stopping.
So now that we understand this, that verse we read reads more like this. He that keeps back or withholds punishment, education, wisdom, defense, protection, authority, good example, steadying influence, family bonds, hates his son. But he that loves him gives him corrections, teaches self-control, punishes wisely, warns of the consequences of bad behavior and or actions, and instructs on principles for life early. All right, but what if my children are grown? Have I missed my chance? Well, not really. You may not have all the tools that we've discussed available to you, but you still have your example, your assistance, your defense, and the education, the provision of wisdom. You can still provide all of these things. You may have to be more gentle, right? Very understated, but even as adults, your children are watching you, and they're still learning from your example, okay? So, and then, per the promise, even if you raise them in the fear and the admonition of the Lord, there will come a day when they have to decide for themselves what it means to follow Jesus, right? And it may not be early; it may be later in life. My own daughter, right, my youngest, has finally come to that moment when she's made a decision. Okay. Until that day, remember, talk to Jesus about your kids, even the grown ones. Okay. Thank you for indulging me. I like that